Welcome back to New Rockstars. This is The Big Question, the show that gives you too much information about how Zack Snyder's DCEU vision is actually perfect, so long as you keep up with the comment screenshots from Vero. You know, it's not that hard. If you were a true fan, you would already know this. With Zack Snyder's Justice League, we think only weeks away from its premiere on HBO Max, we're gonna break down the complete DCEU timeline. What happened to this promising franchise? And, you know, thanks to the Snyder Cut and a couple other titles, maybe James Gunn's Suicide Squad, the Flash movie starring Michael Keaton, the DCEU can be saved, folks. Its best days may still be ahead. We're gonna explain how that will happen. I'm Erik Voss. Here with me today is Zach Huddleston. Hey man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Erik. I'm here to represent Zacks the world over, be they Snyders or Huddlestons. Yep. I've got my hat turned backwards like it's time to do business, and because I haven't had a haircut in a really long time.
Yeah, it's the Ash Ketchum rule of getting serious.
Yes.
Yeah, and you were here, I believe, last time we talked about the DCEU in a Big Question episode. We talked about the kill counts between Batman and v Superman. It's very interesting to look at that Kryptonian Genesis chamber to see if, you know, those counts as lives. They don't count. They weren't fertilized.
Hey, life begins at pod.
That sounds like a great podcast about abortion that I won't listen to.
Friends of the Life Begins at Pod. Thank you for having me back. I have a big question I want to propose to you. How did the DCEU get so f***ed up, and how can the Snyder Cut restore it to its rightful glory?
It's good that we're talking about this. It's a fascinating tale, the tale of the DCEU. Let's start with some background. How did we get to this point in the DCEU to where we need the Snyder Cut, this weird HBO Max experiment to see if we can save it? Well, let's rewind the clock back to Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Super successful. Broke records. It was amazing. We can agree to that. But Nolan, if you remember, outright refused to put Superman or anyone with actual superpowers in his movies. He wanted a grounded vision. He wanted everything to be grounded in science and logic, except for when it comes to The Dark Knight Rises, how Batman can heal his back in a week.
Oh, your money!
20 minutes later.
After the Dark Knight trilogy, Warner Brothers sought to reboot the DC lineup as a cinematic universe. They've been trying to do that for years, and they saw what was happening at Marvel, and they're like, why are they successful? We have better characters. Let's do our version of it and show them how it's done. And the first title on this was Man of Steel. That was Zack Snyder's relaunch of the DCEU, as it became known to be called. Man of Steel rebooted the Superman mythology, really, if you think about it, as an immigrant story. Henry Cavill was great. The production designers are really great about sneaking in a ton of DC Easter eggs. There was Ace Chemicals, there was Luthor Corp everywhere, the little Batman clues. Zack Snyder talked about how they left one of those Kryptonian pods open when Kal-El found it, hinting at another Kryptonian's existence on Earth, maybe Supergirl. It really felt like you were joining a broader world. It was really fun, and it ended up wrecking huge portions of Metropolis, and it forced Superman to snap Zod's neck. Controversial, but emotionally justified. What do you think of Man of Steel, Zach?
I liked it. It had been a while since we'd seen a Superman movie at that point, right? Since the Brandon Routh one-off. And it was refreshing to see our old Cape buddy back in action. Sure, I kind of agreed with some of the, people who thought it was a slightly bloodier take than we might have needed, but it felt like, okay, this is the Superman equivalent to the Christopher Nolan Batman.
I think we were all at least willing to see what Zack Snyder had up his sleeve next, because the guy is a very good technical director. He knows how to compose a shot. He can compose some really, really beautiful sequences on screen. So that led Warner to approve a Justice League lineup of films under Snyder's vision, but the next movie would not come out for another 3 years. So to make up for that wait, the next title was really DC's biggest fan service swing of all time, or at least to date. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Zach, do you remember 2013 Comic-Con when Zack Snyder showed the Superman crest? He's like, I'm going to do another Superman movie, and then the bat sigil shadowed up behind it. Everyone lost their minds.
Oh my my God. Yeah, that was, I have a very vivid memory of that exact thing you just described.
I was like, they're actually doing it, and they got a great cast in here. So this movie was going to launch the Justice League. It was going to bring in Lex Luthor. It was going to introduce a new, older, grizzled Batman played by Ben Affleck. It was going to clash the two biggest names in comics. It really can't be overstated how exciting this was for DC fans. However, when the trailers started to come out, a lot of us got worried because Warner was just showing so much in these trailers. They were giving it all away. They were showing how Wonder Woman arrives, which was like one of the coolest moments in the movie. They put in the trailer. Doomsday they put in the trailer, which basically told us that Superman was going to die. When Batman v Superman eventually released in March 2016, when I went to go see it, the movie looks beautiful. It opens with this one of my favorite sequences, this dramatic point of view shift for the Battle Metropolis from angry Ben Affleck, Bruce Wayne. It looks great. It's so dramatic and heart pounding. The duel between Bruce and Clark as they were going layer by layer, blow for blow, was pretty cool. But I mean, we're not going to go over what the problems were with this movie. We know there were some muddy plot points. The Ultimate Edition did help clear a lot of that up. I would say ultimately didn't entirely fix, but it did clear up a lot of questions I had coming out of the theatrical cut. Now, in this one, the Easter eggs were awesome. There was this creepy Easter egg of dead Robin's suit in the Batcave that had ha 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 jokes on you, Batman, saying the Joker killed Robin. Now, we thought it was a nod to Joker killing Jason Todd, like the Death in the Family comic, but Snyder actually later clarified that the dead Robin was Dick Grayson. There was also that creepy nightmare sequence with a post-apocalyptic Earth post-Darkseid, because it had the Omega symbol there, an evil Superman, and then Bruce woke up from that dream to still be what seemed like a dream, visit by a time-traveling Flash who tells Bruce that he was right about him, referring to Clark, and that Lois was the key. It seems like this is about to get revisited in the Snyder Cut. We'll get back to that. So just to kind of recap what this film gave us, Zack Snyder promised us 1, coming conflict with Darkseid and Steppenwolf; 2, the resurrection of Superman in his black suit in the next movie; 3, the Justice League lineup, Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, and maybe future prospects like Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter; 4, a distant post-apocalyptic future with evil Superman that the Flash would have to fix via what we assumed would be a Flashpoint Paradox insane step in the movie franchise. Unfortunately, in Justice League, we ended up getting none of that. Hopefully, we'll get it back in the fixed version.
It does seem, and you're going to get into this when you talk about Justice League here in a moment, right? That like, this is where the DCEU diverges between what Snyder had originally planned for the entire thing and what we ended up getting. Right? Would you say that this is the main fork in the road?
Yes, I think it was right around here where like Warner did not know what to do with that film. They, rather than just trusting Snyder to just kind of carry out his vision for better or worse, they started to meddle and they started to tinker, but they also saw some success in other releases, and I think they learned the wrong lessons from those. And that started with Suicide Squad, which I would say is a movie that we were excited about, but suffered from Warner's expectation game, like Batman v Superman did. I think you remember David Ayer's early trailer. It got really mixed reactions. There was that line from Will Smith where he's like, so do we some kind of Suicide Squad? And everyone's like, oh, come on, seriously?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you will, look right here.
But then, a twist in spring 2016, they hired a new trailer cutting company who edited a trailer to sync with Bohemian Rhapsody, and that was one of the coolest trailers ever. The reaction was too good, though, because then Warner's like, oh, okay, we'll just let this company re-edit the entire film. And then a lot of stuff got lost, right? Ayer never really got his final cut. And then the movie ended up being a super colorful, crazy soundtrack, chaotic mess. It does kind of tie into the DCEU. They have these splashy title cards where they reveal that Harley Quinn helped kill Robin. Ben Affleck Batman actually shows up in these flashbacks to apprehend Jared Leto Joker and Harley Quinn. Ezra Miller Flash shows up, arresting Captain Boomerang. But the plot, Zach, I'm sorry, this movie is just kind of nonsensical the way it was released theatrically. A lot of the cast spends the final battle just like watching stuff happen. Joker dies, it seems like, but then comes back to life to break out Harley Quinn in the end. Never explained, which is why a lot of fans are now demanding the Ayer cut.
Not to get too movie criticky here. Well, this is a great time for you to stick your foot potentially in your mouth again, Erik, as somebody who's maybe not been super enthusiastic about the Snyder cut. What are your thoughts on a potential Ayer cut?
I mean, mean, look, if the Snyder Cut existed in some form, the Ayer Cut exists in some form, right? He has, I think Zack Snyder knew what he wanted to do with Justice League more than Ayer knew what he wanted to do with Suicide Squad. I'll just say that. I am more excited by James Gunn's The Suicide Squad than whatever Ayer had in the works. And I kind of want to see what James Gunn was with it, and then we can see what happens on the other side.
And it seems like that's what Warner Brothers thought as well, right? Like there are no next Justice League movies planned. They're investing their time and resources into the Snyder Cut.
Right.
Whereas there's about to be released a brand new Suicide Squad movie, right?
But let's talk about Wonder Woman in 2017. This movie, of course, remember, a flashback to World War I. It was inspired by that 1918 photo that Bruce Wayne found of Diana that he gave to her in Batman v Superman. In this movie, Diana saves Chris Pine, Steve Trevor from some Germans, and then she crosses into no man's land. It's pretty cool. She defeats her uncle Ares, though Steve has to give up his own life. But really, what I think a lot of people forget is that Wonder Woman opened with this cool new DC cinematic fanfare that promised a wide range of possible film adaptations. We saw like Nightwing, Green Lantern Corps, Gotham City Sirens, Mr. Freeze. I was so pumped to see what all, like I was waiting for the day in like 2025 when I could go back and link to say they ended up doing this one and this one and this one and this one. They got to all of it. But here's the problem, Zach. Warner learned the wrong lesson from Wonder Woman's success. I think the studio was so thrilled with the response to that movie that they just like clung to it as this backup plan to just keep pumping out loosely connected DCEU charming movies, but without any broader vision of how it would connect to anything else. But if you already kind of make the promise to your audience that some of this is going to connect, they start to hold it to a higher standard of interconnectivity. So you can't really have it both ways. You have to either make Elseworlds anthology type movies, or you can make something to where it's like the MCU, where everything is connected. And I think that is why we're seeing a lot of the reactions to Wonder Woman 84. I think fans are confused, and they're rightly confused, because the studio set up the sequel to be very confusing.
So I just want to keep track of some of maybe the lessons learned here, Erik. Not a great sign when you keep recutting a movie separate from the original movie's director, right? Not a great sign when maybe you take the wrong lessons from both the excitement around a trailer and around kind of like a big hit, or even the lesson you take away from maybe an underwhelming hit, right? Like a lot of people have interpreted the box office returns of Batman vs Superman impacted Warner Brothers' future decision making, because that movie was not a huge kind of financial success, right?
Yeah, it made a lot of money, just not as much as they wanted it to. Yeah.
Yes. And so there were, I guess earlier I said this is the fork in the road, but it seems like the fork keeps forking, right? This is a whole forking mess over here.
Which leads us to the Justice League theatrical cut later in the year in 2017. That's where the fork in the road just caused the train to derail and smash into a school, and they just keep going and going and going until it runs over a DeLorean, and we can't go back in time anymore because the Flash isn't in movies. So I'll say this about Justice League. Zack Snyder had, I remember 2016 Comic-Con, Zack Snyder released a trailer for this movie, and people were like, whoa, you already have all this footage to give us. And I got so excited. The vision seemed so promising. The cast seemed fully fleshed out. The tone seemed already there. And I was excited to see what he was going to do with this. He put together what was like a several hour crazy cut of the movie. And then in early 2017, tragedy struck with his family. His daughter died, so he stepped down from production. So then the studio, afraid that this cut of the movie was going to be too dark or too gritty. But really, the problem was the studio didn't know what they wanted. They didn't know what they didn't want. They didn't know what they wanted.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
They were just kind of reacting to everything, and they ended up handing the movie over to Joss Whedon, thinking he would just fix everything because, hey, it's a guy who did the Avengers, he knows what he's doing, reshooting a lot of it. And then the result was a cut that left the movie's mythology completely undeveloped. The VFX was just like potato-y. We all remember the reshoots with Henry Cavill that forced him to CGI over his mustache. He gave him that really goofy looking upper lip.
You won't let me live. You won't Let me die.
It's like that scene did not need to be in the movie at all. Like, there's just a lot of, huh? Like, really? That's our Justice League? Huh? So all of Snyder's plans for Justice League Part 2 that were gonna bring in Darkseid, and then we're gonna circle back to that nightmare sequence and that Flashpoint setup, all that was scrapped. There was this post-credit scene with Lex Luthor and Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke that maybe was gonna set up Deathstroke as the Ben Affleck Batman solo film villain, but then that film was scrapped when they couldn't agree on a version of the project that Ben Affleck was okay with.
You are going to be directing Batman potentially?
That's the idea. The idea is that there's no movie, yet. It's not a movie, but there is the plan to make a Batman movie.
And they kind of went back to square one with that, then going to Matt Reeves, who reconceived it as a new Robert Pattinson, the Batman, which looks great, but it's just in a different world. Meanwhile, everything seemed to be tail spinning. There was a planned Harley Quinn Joker rom-com spinoff from the This Is Us creators that was canceled, along with a Jared Leto Joker solo film canceled. Really, it just let the Todd Phillips Joaquin Phoenix Joker go because it was super low budget, and they moved forward, and that ended up like winning Oscars and making a crap ton of money. Meanwhile, the dominant DCEU narrative for the next few years was, when will Warner Brothers release the Snyder Cut? And Zach, you remember where we were at with that? We were like, is this a real story?
As you pointed out a couple of times, it was hard to tell. Is this a very small contingent of super passionate people who are kind of clinging to this idea, right? Or is this a real movement with enough people behind it and kind of the public momentum? Because don't you think it was a dark period, I mean that in multiple ways, for the DCEU, right? After Justice League comes out, and really nobody was happy with it, right? The hardcore fans, the general public.
Right.
And so it's like, they need something to look forward to. And like, this was kind of the light. No, this last movie was not what we wanted, but that's because, it was mishandled by Joss Whedon. And boy, when you think about it, they really couldn't have hired a worse person. Now, and this isn't even Ray Fisher over here talking about like the various harmful behaviors on set, but like Joss Whedon, a guy who's like made a similar movie and so has this very distinct vision. If they would have just kind of hired a journeyman director to come in and take it across the finish line, right? Grab some European guy who knows how to do a good tracking shot and just let him get that last 20% out that Snyder was unable to finish. But instead they bring in this very specific, determined, successful director who reshapes the entire thing in his image, and it just turns into a mess.
This is the best version of me that I can explain.
So then there was this kind of awkward year throughout 2018. It ended with Aquaman coming out. And that was James Wan's undersea origin story for Arthur Curry, Jason Momoa, and kind of a royal conflict with his half-brother Orm, Patrick Wilson. And that was kind of set up by the fact that Arthur had this 5-pronged trident, a quintdent, whatever, of his mother. In Justice League, it was Atlanta's, and so he kind of inherited it. But in the Aquaman movie, we see him acquiring the 3-pronged trident of his ancestor, King Atlan, to become the true orange and green suited Aquaman. And there weren't really a ton of DCEU Easter eggs in Aquaman. I remember there was more like James Wan Easter eggs. There was like Annabelle showed up in there. But I don't remember seeing a lot of like, oh, this is how that connects to that. It was like James Wan was just steering clear of a lot of it.
And so much of that movie took place underwater. So it's easy to avoid like a random flash spotting if you're in the Marianas Trench or whatever.
Right. Now, a couple months later, Shazam came out, which, that movie kind of came and went because 2019 was obviously a huge year for comic book movies. But I really like David F. Sandberg. I love his horror film work. And he kind of did this homage to Big. Zach Levi was the adult Billy Bats in Shazam. And I kind of liked it. It felt like an old school superhero movie. I thought it was funny. It was charming. And the way it connected to the DCEU, I thought was really clever because it was just kind of like the way fanboys connect to it. Like Freddie Freeman was obsessed with the Justice League heroes. He wears shirts and jackets for all of them. He has merch all over his shelves. He has like newspaper clippings from past events. So it feels like it's in the world, but that's not like, it serves the character. It's not just like forced in. And then we all remember the final scene of that. It features a cameo by Superman, but it was like a headless Superman because they couldn't get Henry Cavill to do it. So we just see his body coming with John Williams' Superman theme, and we don't see his head, which I assume he was headless.
And I will say, I agree that Shazam movie was so much fun. And it was nice in that it took like the fun montages of some of these other superhero movies and just like really embraced those and kind of almost like stretched those to be feature length. That movie was a good time.
Yeah, it was enjoyable. 2019 ended though with a very interesting moment for the DCEU, a movie that's not part of the DCEU, Joker. A complete surprise monster success. This thing broke box office records. I think it's the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Won awards, won Oscars. It is not at all connected to the DCU. It's really uninterested in DC mythology. It's really more of like a mental illness character study, kind of like Taxi Driver.
Who the do you think you're talking to?
With a Fight Club style unreliable narrator.
That's right.
But the thing with Joker was it gave the studio a path forward without the DCEU. They started to wonder, well, do we need this interconnectivity if we can do very low budget movies and make 10 times as much back? Around the same time, the CW did the Crisis on Infinite Earths. That was the Arrow versus Flash versus the Berlanti shows, their annual crossover event. But they connected it to the DCEU in a really fun way. They had a cameo by Ezra Miller, Barry Allen, and many of us believe that we could see the mirror side of it in the upcoming Flash movie. And then moving right along to Birds of Prey, one of the only movies to come out in 2020 theatrically. Really, this was just an excuse to bring back Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn from Suicide Squad and try to make her what I think was the Deadpool of the DCEU. She was freshly broken up with Mr. J, and we really only see him, I think, in the form of a doodle. There were some customary DC background set Easter eggs. Ace Chemicals showed up again, but the only one of importance to the DCEU going forward was this wanted poster for Captain Boomerang, which signaled to us that he must have escaped from prison and that he would show up in some Suicide Squad in the future.
I enjoyed it. Also, one of the best egg sandwich cameos in any movie I've seen in a long time.
Egg, bacon, American cheese, dash of hot sauce.
It's hard to find a good breakfast sandwich in LA. People want their nice, cute Instagrammy brunches, not their like sloppy, greasy, wrapped bodega sandwiches.
Eating crap with these sacks of shit. If they died tomorrow, no one would shed a tear. So cute.
Hey, if you live in LA, you know where to find a good breakfast sandwich. Let me know. I found Cafe Tropical in Los Feliz, and I found Hank's Bagels in Toluca Lake, which has a great bagel breakfast sandwich.
Right down the street from me.
You actually live above it?
Yeah. Don't find me.
So that brought us to the present, Wonder Woman 1984. This movie, I have some mixed feelings about it. Really just ignored DCEU continuity altogether, which at this point, I bet the filmmaker just thought that no one really remembers what the rules are. Diana can fly in this movie, despite not flying decades later. The world undergoes an insane nuclear crisis based on Max Lord's genie magic monkey paw law.
Life is good, but it can be better.
That would not have left the world as it was in Man of Steel and Batman v Superman. I'm sorry. It's just insane. Really, these past couple DCEU titles just feel like obligatory sequels and spin-offs that were just eagerly greenlit after modest fan approval in the past without any broader creative goal to them. And that's just because Warner alienated their key visionary to unite all this stuff, Zack Snyder. And Jeff Johns hasn't been able to communicate a unifying vision that can get the studio and the filmmakers united behind. So it's just kind of a confusing place where it's at right now. However, the DCEU appears to be headed for a possible rebirth. And I'm not talking about the DC rebirth, I'm talking about a DCEU rebirth, my friends, starting with Zack Snyder's Justice League. Coming to HBO Max sometime this year, we think as soon as March. And Zack Snyder has promised to restore his original vision. We're gonna see some deleted sequences featuring Ray Fisher's performance as Cyborg. We're gonna see Black Suit Superman, Darkseid's backstory, the whole nightmare future. Flash is gonna use his Speed Force to travel through time, we think. It looks like a very different tonal experience that might hit a lot of the same story beats as the theatrical cut, but it's going to put them in a much more, I think, satisfying context. But Zach, let's talk about how the Snyder Cut could fix the DCEU. One, it could set up Flashpoint and set up the upcoming Flash movie, which can then use time travel in the DC multiverse to resolve all past plot holes.
I'm telling you, once we clear the air, everybody's gonna be pals again.
The second way it can fix, it can kind of turn the page. It can give the proper send-off to Henry Cavill or Ben Affleck in a way that doesn't make their era feel like a mistake.
Save Martha!
You can kind of create a new 52 reset for DC Cinematic going forward. However, it could also bring back Cavill. It could reopen the door for Henry Cavill to return as Superman. The guy was great. I would say after Zack Snyder, Cavill seems like the most underused talent from this franchise. And Zach, you asked about this earlier, but this could lead to more director cut series. I am someone who loves every cut of everything, every version, every deleted scene. I'll watch it all. Yeah. And if the Snyder Cut, it's an interesting experiment. It could lead to a surge of subscriptions to HBO Max. And if HBO is happy with it, if Warner's happy, hell, let's see that Ayer cut of Suicide Squad. Whatever it is, let's see it. And let's see Ben Affleck's vision for the Batman.
Like, where's the Batman? Bro, I'm working. Give me a second.
Like, if fans want it, if the director's on board, if it can be done on budget, via animation or storyboards, do a documentary series, do live readings. There are lots of ways this vision could move forward.
Just deepfake Ben Affleck onto Robert Pattinson for every shot of the Batman.
Yep. It's good to have dreams.
Now, here's what I'm worried about the DCEU. Here are the challenges to fixing the DCEU, because I think Warner could get greedy and cash in with more sequels and spin-offs that don't really make sense. Like, we got a sequel to Aquaman coming late 2022, maybe early 2023. We got Shazam, Fury of the Gods coming 2023. They recently greenlit a third Wonder Woman movie. Patty Jenkins might not come back for that one. And then we got the Shazam spin-off Black Adam.
White Wade Wilson.
Starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Now, if you are excited about any of these titles, I don't want to take any of your excitement. They could all be fantastic movies, but here's what's scary about it. They really, really, really need the Snyder Cut and Suicide Squad and at least a Flash trailer to keep the fan thirst alive for these titles. Because otherwise, and this is a big challenge with the DCEU, when your characters are out of sight, they're out of mind. You don't have like 2 to 3 movies a year to remind us all that these characters exist. When you have 2 to 3 movies a year like the MCU does, you have a ton of trailers coming out. You have tie-in series coming out. Like, fans don't forget people exist. Whereas, when these movies returned, like when Wonder Woman 84 trailer came out, I was like, oh, that model from 4 years ago is doing something new now. But here's the challenge for the Snyder Cut. If the Snyder Cut and, let's say, the Suicide Squad and the Flash are earth-shatteringly successful enough, that could convince Warner and HBO Max, AT&T, their parent company, to keep that cinematic universe alive in a different form, even if it's just on HBO Max. They did already say that they plan to release a couple movies theatrically every year and then a couple movies just on the streaming platform. That could be where the DCEU lives on, and I wouldn't have a problem with that, as long as we can get it. We can get to it faster if it releases on my TV at home. And then maybe some of them are so good, you also do a theatrical release, and I'll pay to see it in the theater. Like, The Flash could be so insanely good that we are now excited to see these Aquaman
could have just peed on it.
And Shazam and Wonder Woman sequels and spinoffs that we're going to get. We want to see what those characters do post-crisis. Ultimately, though, Zach, I think we might finally see a live-action DC lineup that does fulfill the promise of that 2017 fanfare of all the characters. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we really want.
That's interesting, because where my gut instinct says, in a time when Marvel is condensing, right? It used to be like the Netflix Marvel world or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. They were kind of slightly separate from the film versions, right? But now, no, there is only one Marvel now, right? The anything streaming, anything on TV, any film are all going to exist in the exact same universe. There's part of me that's like, DC should swerve hard in the other direction, and I want 1,000 different universes, right? The Flash doesn't need to take place in the same world as Aquaman or future Justice Leagues or the Batman or whatever, right? Like, give us as superhero movie consumers, right, more options rather than just 2.
Well, and that's the argument for letting the Flash be a Flashpoint story that can just restore it into kind of a new 52 that don't always connect. Maybe the Flash ends with this is the climax of the DCEU. These characters are done. And then now they don't have to reference each other ever again. Yeah. Until later, somewhere down the line, someone wants to take another shot at doing Justice League. Maybe it's Zack Snyder, maybe it's someone else who learns from his vision and tries to improve upon it or go in a different direction. But I think he deserves his opportunity to tell the vision he wanted to tell. He's getting it, and that's great. And I think it could really set up Flash to be the distillation of that connects everything together and then never again.
I love it. I like that.
But we'll see. Let us know what you want the future of the DCEU to be in the comments below. We're going to move on to some friends who helped us make this episode. First, we want to thank our friends at Amazon Pharmacy for sponsoring this episode of Big Question. Take a break from streaming the newest season of The Boys or buying a new gadget and check out the pharmacy section of Amazon. Trust me on this. Amazon Pharmacy is the super easy way to save time and money and not have to wait in line at the actual physical pharmacy, which I freaking hate. I hate being inside anywhere right now, especially around people who need medications to feel better. And it's just, I don't like it. Well, Amazon Pharmacy coordinates with your doctor to receive your prescriptions, and then they deliver those medications right to your door. They work with most insurance plans. It's awesome. I'm already buying stuff on Amazon because of the convenience and the easy delivery. It just makes sense to do the same with prescriptions, doesn't it? Something I don't want to worry about running out of. Let's be honest. Pharmacy errands are among the least fun errands, up there with trips to the post office or like contesting a parking ticket, wisdom tooth removal. I hate that errand. It's so painful. Take one of those pains off your to-do list with Amazon Pharmacy. Amazon Prime members can save on prescription medication when not using insurance and get free 2-day delivery. Learn more at amazon.com/bigquestionrx. That's amazon.com/bigquestionrx. Amazon.com/bigquestionrx. Zach, we're getting Bezos money now?
Yeah, now all we got to do is get Elon Musk money and we'll have the world's two richest men in our back pocket.
And then we'll gradually drain them dry. Oh, and also, je suis excité pour Snyder Cut. In case you don't speak French, obviously I don't either, but that translates to I am excited for Snyder Cut, and I just learned it from Babbel, the #1 selling language learning app. Thank you to Babbel for sponsoring this episode of Big Question. Folks, I would love to get to travel to Europe someday, and I want to be able to chat with the new nerd friends in their native tongue. Well, Babbel has made that language learning process addictively fun and easy with bite-sized lessons that you are going to actually use in the real world. Babbel's 15-minute lessons make it the perfect way to learn a new language on the go while you're waiting in a drive-through line or during a commercial break. Unlike those language classes that you took from high school and block out, as I do most of my high school memories, Babbel designs their courses with practical, real-world conversations in mind, things that you will use in everyday life. Their teaching method has been scientifically proven to be effective. With Babbel, you can choose from 14 different languages, including Spanish, French, Italian, and German. Plus, Babbel's speech recognition technology helps you improve your pronunciation and accent, which I should probably open up another lesson because obviously my French needs work. Right now, when you purchase a 3-month Babbel subscription, you will get an additional 3 months for free. That's 6 months for the price of 3. Just go to Babbel.com and use their promo code BIGQUESTION. That's BABBEL.com, code BIGQUESTION for an extra 3 months free. Babbel, language for life. All right, now we're going to move on to some bite-sized question that Zach's going to answer for us. You ready, Zach?
Absolutely.
All right. Our friend Actually Sauceless again from Discord asks, in Avengers Endgame, when Thor summons his hammer in the past, what would have happened if 2013 Thor tried summoning it at the same time? Would it go to whomever is worthier, or does it just stop in place, being pulled in both directions?
I love it. And, you know, the worthiness of Mjolnir is such a fun topic, right? It's one of the most interesting things within the MCU because it's evolved a little bit over time. And God, has there ever been a moment better than Cap wielding Mjolnir in that final battle in Endgame? I mean, I could watch that video of the theater crowd cheering when that happens on loop. It would make me smile all day long. This particular question is really fun. And quick shout out to Actually Sauceless, or Saucy Bobby, the entire Sauceverse on Discord. I like this question because it applies not only to older Thor versus young Thor, right? But Thor versus Cap, since Endgame, established Cap as worthy. And that battle was like this insane melee, right? Where there's moving bodies and good guys and bad guys flying around, right? Like both Avengers would likely even just instinctually have tried to summon Mjolnir at the same time, right? Out of each other's hands. Yeah, Cap, reaching back to whack a dude, and just Mjolnir flies away and into Thor's hand.
You son of a bitch.
For gosh sake, watch your language.
So I think it's important for us here to define worthiness in this context,
yes.
right? And whether worthiness is this kind of subjective quality that can be measured on a spectrum, or is it like a binary trait, a yes/no kind of thing? You either are worthy or are not. Or could you be, somebody
Pass fail.
Yes. Welcome to worthiness.
School. And you fail.
Yeah, could somebody be a 9.2 of worthiness versus a 9.7 or something like that, right? If it is this kind of spectrum idea, right? Of it's a range, much like maybe sexuality or autism or lots of other things, right? Mjolnir, in theory, would give priority to the most worthy wielder, right? Like whoever's the most worthy, should two people be summoning it at the same time, it would fly to that person, right? And you could argue that Endgame Thor might have been the most worthy, right? Because if Thor 1 or Thor Dark World Thor was worthy of Mjolnir, well, he's only experienced more, he's matured more, he's learned more about sacrifice, he had that great reconnection with his mom, right? Like, he went kind of through the dark valley of being Fortnite Thor. He managed to summon Mjolnir in 2013 when he went back to Asgard from whoever had it in that moment, which in theory was 2013 Thor. Right, that's Thor Dark World era Thor, and Endgame Thor is basically able to snatch it right from his grip. So in theory, Endgame Thor more worthy than Dark World Thor. Would you agree with that?
I would. You could say that like his retirement period made him less worthy, but I don't think so. I think you're right. The fact that he could get it in that moment, he realized he was still worthy, and at least after resolving issues with his mother, he was probably at max worthiness. That it was his final form of worthiness.
He must be finished transforming.
He's technically more of everything in Endgame. Body mass, hair, hand-eye coordination. You could also argue that Endgame Cap is more worthy than Endgame Thor, okay? Since Thor, right, like we'd said, Thor's been through some stuff. He's at a low point, especially at the beginning of Endgame, right? He kind of gave up. He let himself go. He's not in maybe the best mental state. He has magically braided his beard, but the beard's still there, right? He's still a little rough. He's still a little bit in the wilderness.
I'm completely lost.
None of his Avenger buddies, or really Thor for that matter, right? Like, trusted him to do the snap, right? They gave that to Hulk, right? That says something about he's maybe not in the best place mentally, even though technically the guy's a god. He should have been the one, all things being equal, snapping. If we say, and again, the definition has changed over time, but like if Asgardian worth seems to respond to courage, strength, resilience, selflessness, right? The ability to, or the willingness to sacrifice oneself for your loved ones, as Thor showed us in the very first Thor movie, right? Like, boy, nobody embodies that better than Cap. And he has not had the dark arc of kind of like losing those qualities, right? Like, throughout every MCU appearance of Captain America, right? He's embodied that worthiness.
Yeah, he's been pretty steady.
Simple life.
And some have argued, I like this argument too, that in that scene in Age of Ultron, at the party scene where everybody's like trying to, pull up on Mjolnir and Tony can't move it and Rhodey can't move it and Bruce can't move it and Cap wiggles it just a little bit. That was Cap holding back. He knew he could have picked it up, but because he's so worthy, he didn't want to make his buddy Thor feel bad. Right. And in fact, that only proves his worthiness, that he's not a showboater, right? That like he doesn't want to do this. He wiggled it almost by accident, or maybe in that tiny wiggle, he realized that he could do it and he didn't want to, right? Because that's not his style.
Yeah.
The MCU has given no indication that anybody can be more worthy than anybody else, right? They haven't really shown us that there's this scale. It seems like the MCU is probably on this binary thing, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Odin's sweet little whisper, right? Cue the Yin Yang twins.
Hey, how you doing, little mama? Let me whisper in your ear.
whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, right? Blah, blah, blah. So it's whosoever. It's not like if he be the most worthy, if he be a slightly above somebody else or whatever, right? It's just you either are or you are not. So Thor is worthy. Boom. Cap is worthy, right? Vision is worthy. Maybe not enough people talk about that.
That's right.
Homeboy Vision just picking it up. Now, you can make the argument, it might have been a joke that like Vision is just an elevator, right? If you put Mjolnir in an elevator and it went up a floor, that's basically what Vision is.
A living being.
Yeah, he's not a person, so he's just a machine, like a forklift or whatever. But Odin is worthy, and technically Hela is worthy, right? Hela destroys
That's right.
Mjolnir. She catches it, destroys it. Now we could get into the weeds here about like worthiness to wield Mjolnir versus worthiness to have the powers of Thor, right? And they haven't gone into a ton of detail there, right? To totally like shoot the lightning and access the Bifrost and stuff like that. Like that might be an extra degree of worthiness above just being able to hold the hammer and crack somebody with it. Those are the kind of the 4 confirmed people within the MCU that we know about it, right? And I think Hela is the most instructive one there. But let's say one of those summoners is not evil, out for revenge Hela, but if it had been Cap and Endgame Thor trying to summon it at the same time, 2 equally worthy people, right? I think it comes back down to just dibs, right? If I happen to summon it a fraction of a second ahead of you, Erik, right? You being Endgame Thor and me being Endgame Cap in this moment, I get first dibs, right? And then maybe once it comes to me, maybe it could flow back to you. Who knows? We could make that argument, right? But like, I think that's what it has to be. And even if it's a fraction of a millionth of a second, right?
But I would say the problem is like that's never going to happen because if you're worthy, you're okay with the hammer going to someone else who's worthy, So it's like you're never going to get to the situation where people are equally wanting it. They'd be like, oh, yeah, it's fine. You take it. No, you take it. No, you take it.
After you. Oh, no, you first. I couldn't think of it.
If Thor did accidentally yank it out of his hand because he needed it, Cap would have been cool with that. He would have just started smashing guys with the shield. And I think that is the fascinating part of that Hela moment of like before Thor can summon it back, she destroys it, right? So she never has that kind of like, which almost like the action, there's a lot of catch-22s with Mjolnir in that like the action of destroying it proves you're unworthy, but it's too late because it's already destroyed.
She was able to wield it before Odin's worthiness charm. So she's kind of like, her wielding of it is different. It's not a worthy thing for her. She is just like, she was there. She was kind of there. It was originally hers to begin with. So she's kind of like, grandfathered into that.
Yeah, grandmothered, grand-godded in.
Grand wizarded?
Yeah. Oh, not there. I do love that, like, in the comics, they obviously have more time to spend on Mjolnir. And we could see this in Thor Love and Thunder with Jane Foster. Like, Mjolnir is almost like the embodiment. It almost has a personality, right? There's almost like some decision-making within the magic hammer. And, like, Mjolnir chooses to let Jane Foster kind of wield it, and they kind of forms that partnership with her. And we know, Natalie Portman is we saw that Comic-Con moment, right? She's gonna wield Mjolnir. And so like, it would be interesting if they explore a little bit of that as well. Because it's magic. You could do whatever you want. It's magic.
Is that how mirrors work? Shut up, Beth.
That is true. All right, another question from Manscaping Pancakes on Discord asks, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, Scott Lang states that the largest size he's been able to grow to is 65 feet. Does he break that record during the final battle of Avengers Endgame? If so, by how much?
Okay. And this is one of those great questions that we can really get specific with, right? There's a great screenshot, right? When everybody's coming through the portals in that final battle, right? There's giant Scott, right? And then down at his feet, right, there are human characters or human-sized characters, right? And you can extrapolate that he is 19 times taller than the human character at his foot. And so we don't know. It's a zoomed out shot. You can't tell, is that Black Panther or, Captain America or whoever. We have no idea who the character is. But if you assume maybe an average heighted human male, right? It's about 5'9", right? So 19 times 5'9" would be about 109 feet tall, 33 meters for our in the developed world. So that's almost double the height that he'd achieved before. Which makes sense. It's the biggest battle in the history of the MCU. We need the biggest possible giant man, right? But I think some people have made the argument he actually might even be taller than that. Because, right, he holds Hulk in the palm of his hand. MCU Hulk is usually considered to be about 7'5", somewhere between that and 8 feet.
Oh, at least. I think he's like 10 feet. That guy's a big dude.
Fair enough, right? And palm of his hand, right? Like I would hold a baseball or something like that. So like that, and I think if we go back to that image that we showed earlier, right? Some people have argued that actually the little humans might even be standing closer to camera than Scott, right? So there's maybe even some perspective issue there. And that those humans might not be normal humans, might not be Americans for that matter, right? They seem to be Wakandan warriors. Seems like they got little spears next to them, right? And if they're Wakandans from the Jabari tribe, right? Those are some big people, okay? M'Baku and his men are the tallest, the biggest of the Wakandans, right? Like Winston Duke, the actor who plays M'Baku, he's 6'5". He doesn't even look like the biggest Jabari, right? Like some of them are very large. Like if you assume maybe the person's, standing on the ground next to Scott Lang in that moment might be 7 feet tall. Ooh, well, you multiply that out times 19, right? Like you get to 133 feet, which is true, like double the previous record of 65. That's big. That's big. Now can you imagine the size of the orange slice Scott is gonna need the next day after getting that?
He's gonna take like a month-long nap after that. That guy didn't get winded at all.
Probably worth it though. To save half the people on Earth. Probably, it's okay to gas yourself out in that moment, I think.
Yeah, double sounds good. It sounds like the VFX guys, Dan Dilleu, was just like, well, let's make them double. Double as big this time. Times 2.
Everybody else. Cap gets to wield Mjolnir. Tony gets his big, super heroic, I'm Iron Man moment, right? Let Scott, at least in the background, be twice as big as he's ever gotten, right? Yeah.
Scott in the background of the Endgame final battle is one of the best parts about it. It's like we get to see true giant man like punching Leviathans, shoving one through a portal, giving like assist to Spider-Man. It's great.
It's when he shines, right? He's the best possible background character because he's the only one you can make out, besides maybe like tiny like Valkyrie, like Pegasus wings, it's like that distance. He's really the only Marvel character you can make out.
All right. Well, thank you, Zach. Well, that is it for this episode of Big Question. Thank you to Zach for joining me down the rabbit hole of DCEU history.
Thank you, Erik. I had to hold up my hammer earlier. I had a visual aid for the Mjolnir topic.
Too late. Be sure to follow Zach at Z Huddleston. Follow me at EA Voss. Follow New Rockstars. Send us your big questions using the hashtag Big Questions. Subscribe to this podcast feed. Give us a nice rating and review if you don't mind. Subscribe to New Rockstars here on YouTube. Hit that notification bell, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.